So yeah, I've really been liking Talia lately. I really think she's going to be my new.
Let's admire me for a bit.
Oh, okay. But you asked me how I was doing.
Draven does it all. With style.
No, I get that. I'm sure you do. Like you told me previously, but
Places to go, me to see.
Draven, I thought you wanted to know about me.
Don't be jealous.
Just roll the intro.
Draven!
Alright, so let's get the big question out of the way first. Does Draven have narcissistic personality disorder? Well, when it comes to diagnosing a mental illness, we want to be really careful. One wrong diagnosis and you could potentially end a person's career. It's a label that they would have to carry for them for the rest of their lives that affects how others interact with them. One example is the Rosenhan experiment. Psychologist David Rosenhan performed an experiment back in the early 1970s at Stanford University, in which he and several colleagues claimed to hear voices, a symptom of schizophrenia, in order to get admitted into a psychiatric hospital. However, once inside, Rosenhan and his colleagues acted normal and behaved the way they usually do. The whole point of the experiment was to see if anyone there would notice that they were actually sane and not mentally ill. To their surprise, no one was able to notice. In fact, the other patients were able to recognize that they were imposters. This experiment really brought into question not only the way psychiatrists evaluate people with mental illness, but also the level and quality of contact there is between patients and staff. Rosenhan reported almost no contact with the patients while he was there, and regarded the whole experience as dehumanizing. We've been able to move past these days thanks to the work of people like Rosenhan, so we want to be extremely careful when diagnosing a person, or else we risk putting them in a place they don't belong, and labeling them for the rest of their lives. Now, Draven might be narcissistic, but it isn't a pathology. For us to determine if his narcissism is pathological in any way, we would have to go through multiple steps before giving a proper diagnosis. But we don't have to go through all those steps today, because all we have to do is look at one thing: impairment. Impairment refers to the loss of normal functioning and is one of the key features psychologists look for in a mental illness. For example, a person with social anxiety disorder experiences intense anxiety and worry over being judged by others. It's hard to be able to go to work and socialize when you're constantly scared of interacting with people. Now, don't get me wrong, Draven is clearly in love with himself and probably spends more time in front of the mirror than any other person would. But as far as I'm concerned, he seems to be able to function well in society. After all, he was able to be a soldier in the Noxian military. His lore states that he first saw greatness in the Noxian military, and if the Noxian military is like any other military, then Draven definitely needed to be able to take some orders, which is something you wouldn't expect from someone with NPD. Also, it's not like he was discharged from the military and sent to take therapy, which is what you would expect with someone with a mental illness in the military. He just left to find something better to do. I mean, I don't know how someone can just leave the military, but hey, league lore. So yeah, I believe Draven can function fine in society, so no disorders. Alright then, case closed. Thanks for watching. You know that's not the end of the video. I mean, my first episode was 19 minutes long, so you can definitely expect more from me. Draven might not have a disorder, but he definitely has a narcissistic personality. Let's try to figure out how he developed this personality with some psychoanalytic social theory. But Nimbus, didn't we use psychoanalytic theory in the last video with Garen? Yes, we did, faithful viewer. By the way, you're looking fantastic today, faithful viewer. We did use psychoanalytic theory, which was a product of Freud, but today we'll be using psychoanalytic social theory, which was an adaptation created by Karen Horney. Also, I know what you're thinking with her name. Just don't. Miss Horney wasn't the only one to have her own thoughts on Freud's theories. In fact, Freud had kind of like his own psychology club, but each of the members had a falling out with Freud and decided to leave in order to form their own theories. Horney wasn't one of them, but she was among several theorists that criticized Freud's work. If you guys are curious of these two shadowy figures, then maybe I'll cover them in the future too. They were kind of like the psychology Triforce. I was actually thinking about one of their theories and how it can be applied to Kindred's lore.
Let's admire me for a bit.
You're right, let's do that. So how did Draven develop his narcissistic personality? Well, we have to do what we pretty much always do in psychology, and examine Draven's childhood. Horney proposed that instead of being guided by the instincts of the id, humans were motivated by two guiding principles: safety and satisfaction. As babies, all we want is to be protected by our caregivers and for them to satisfy our needs for food and shelter. We receive safety and satisfaction through genuine love and healthy discipline from our caretakers. And we all know the wonderful childhood Draven had with his wonderful brother Darius. Orphaned at a young age, Darius had to fight to keep himself and his younger brother Draven alive. Yeah, there's a reason why I alluded to Draven and Darius' rough childhood in the last video. Growing up as an orphan is definitely the opposite of receiving genuine love. Also, if you can recall from the last video, Noxus values strength, so I don't think they would be too fond of taking care of orphans on the street. Noxian society would probably see them as weak and wouldn't bother in trying to save them. Therefore, Darius and Draven would have to prove their strength and survive on their own in order for them to be valued in Noxian society. And this isn't just my own theory. I took some advice from you wonderful people in my previous video and looked for any Q&As on lore from Riot members themselves and found this somewhat old discussion between fans and Scribbles. I honestly couldn't figure out who Scribbles was at the time or if this person was still working at Riot, but people were asking this person questions on lore about Draven and his name was read in the forums, which signifies that Scribble was, if not still is, a Riot employee. So I figured this would be a safe source to use. Scribbles was asked, is there any specific reason he feels like he has to show off? Is there a backstory where his brother gained a higher rank in the Noxian army earlier than he did, or is it just a matter of his character? Scribbles replied, Noxus is a place where strength equals power. I think Darius would have drilled this into Draven's head, and I think Draven got his desire to show off from it. So I think we're onto something here. Draven and Darius had to prove their strength in order to survive as orphans. This was most likely done through the military because Noxian politics is almost synonymous with their military. The ruling political organization of Noxus is called the Noxian High Command, and it acts as the head of the military. In Noxus, the military controls every aspect of the political landscape. There is no separation between the warfare and politics. So the military definitely seems like the only route for Draven and Darius to take. After all, Darius became the fierce leader he is today by decapitating an enemy captain while the rest of his troops were retreating. So Darius and Draven definitely struggled as kids due to the lack of parents, as well as Noxian culture emphasizing strength. This is definitely not a healthy growing environment for a kid. One of Horney's major criticisms of Freud's psychoanalysis was the fact that it overlooked cultural influences on development. Horney believed the person's culture has a hand in shaping their personality, and Draven is definitely no pushover. He spins around giant metal axes and he can launch them to strike foes precisely like if it was nothing. Draven indeed makes it look too easy. So Draven developed his skills as a result of his culture's influence. You can't be weak in Noxus, and Draven understood that. But that just tells us how Draven became stronger. It doesn't really give us any info on why he's so narcissistic. Well, remember that bit about Draven being an orphan and having to grow up on the streets with his brother? Well, a difficult childhood such as that is what can lead to what Horney calls basic hostility. This is when the child develops hostility towards their parents because of the lack of care, but this is usually repressed. You would have to mess up really badly for your child to consciously hate you. This repressed hostility towards their parents leads to feelings of insecurity, which makes sense. If your parents do not provide that loving, safe environment for you, then you won't feel secure, and instead will feel a bit helpless in this world. This insecurity is what Horney calls basic anxiety, feelings of being helpless in a world conceived as potentially hostile. Draven has had to grow up as an orphan without feeling any form of security a parent could have provided for him. Draven could be holding up some hostility towards his parents for allowing this to happen to him. After all, it's not like Draven chose this life. Draven didn't want to be forced to struggle to stay alive as a kid. No kid wants that. So why did Draven and Darius have to? So tell me, parents, why? What did they do to deserve you abandoning them like that? Did I make you uncomfortable just now? Did I make it seem like I was unloading a lot of frustration out of nowhere? Good, because that was only a taste of the pent-up hostility children can have towards parents that abandon them. To be honest, we don't really know what happened to their parents. It'd probably be even more tragic if their parents actually passed away, but they didn't know. Either way, I'd bet Draven has some repressed hostility, which leads to his feelings of insecurity, otherwise known as basic anxiety. So how does Draven deal with these insecurities? Well, Horney proposed that basic anxiety causes people to search for methods to protect themselves from these insecurities. There are 4 methods in her theory. Affection, when the person searches for affection but through superficial methods, kinda like buying a person's love. Submissiveness, when the person submits themselves to people or in institutions like organizations or a religion. Power, when the person tries to dominate against a real or imagined hostility. And withdrawn, when the person develops an independence from others, becoming emotionally detached. Horney believed we all use these to a certain extent. Everyone experiences some sort of issue and has their own ways of coping after all. But there are certain people that experience issues to a greater degree than normal people do. These people develop compulsive drives. Compulsive drives refers to when these people are not capable of finding any other defense maneuvers to protect themselves and instead keep on relying on the same strategy despite it being unproductive. And Draven has this drive to rely on the same strategy. But what is his preferred method to protect himself? Well, it sounds like affection is his preferred method, and I'll explain why soon. But before that, I need to explain one last thing. You see, Horney originally thought people only used these 4 methods, but she later reformed her theory to include subcategories for these 4 methods. These are called neurotic needs, and there are about 10 of them, but we'll focus on the one that falls into what I believe is Draven's preferred method. The neurotic need that I believe is a perfect description of Draven happens to fall under the affection method and is called the neurotic need for personal admiration. A person with this need needs to be admired by others for what they are. They develop an inflated self-esteem that is constantly fed by this admiration. Sound familiar? These people feel safe in the world when they have admiration of others and will constantly try to maintain that admiration. It's not really genuine love because these people will do anything for others to admire them rather than find people that will do so naturally. Now we can get into how I believe Draven developed his narcissistic personality. Like we said before, Draven is strong and highly skilled at what he does, and this strength is what is valued in his society. Therefore, someone at one point admired his strength, and that's where it all started. When Draven realized that his skill was the key to admiration, he stuck to it. First joining the military because where else is he gonna show off his talent? But when he didn't get his desired amount of admiration, he moved on to find a new way to get that amount he needed. He first sought greatness in the Noxian military, but his flair for the dramatic went severely underappreciated. Thirsting for a method to share Draven with the world, he turned his attention to the prison system. There, he carved out the celebrity he desired by turning the tedious affairs of executions into a premier spectacle. Draven literally turned executioning into a sport. At Draven's first execution, he shocked onlookers when he ordered the doomed prisoner to run for dear life. Just before the man managed to flee from sight, Draven brought him down with a flawless throw of his axe. Soon, all Draven's executions became a gauntlet through which Noxian prisoners raced for a final chance at life. I mean, points for creativity, I guess. Despite how morbid his new performance was, it worked. He drew in crowds of attention. Rejecting the solemn black uniforms of Noxian executioners, Draven donned bright outfits and developed flashy signature moves to distinguish himself. Crowds flocked to see Draven in action, and tales of his performances spread quickly. As his popularity grew, so did his already inflated ego. He belonged at the center of attention. All of this praise and admiration, along with his natural talent and skill, allowed his self-image to grow, thus developing his narcissistic personality. But why do I call it a compulsive drive? Well, he tried being famous through the military, but that wasn't working for him. And he could have just accepted that fact, but instead he sought out another way to get his admiration. Now, what if this new executioner show starts failing? My prediction is that if it starts failing, Draven will try to find something else to do. Try to find another way to gain the viewers and the admiration that he really needs. All of this praise and admiration, along with his natural talent and skill, allowed his self-image to grow, thus developing his narcissistic personality. But more importantly, it's making him feel safe in a hostile world. Draven's narcissistic personality is a result of him wanting safety in a world that he was abandoned in. He's strong and skillful not because he wants to be, but because he has to be in order to feel that safety. Draven. At first glance, he just looked like an arrogant, self-loving dick. But deep down, you're just trying to show the world that you're someone not worth abandoning. After all, that's a pretty scary thought. Just goes to show you what you can learn about someone when you take a look inside. Thank you so much for watching, and I am so sorry for the delay. Finals week was pretty killer, but now that the summer's here, I have some time to hopefully dish out the next episode quicker. So many theories and so many champions to discuss. Speaking of champions... Hey, Double D! How old does that go again? So I gotta rethink about that theory, man. Oh, wait. Anyways, I got work to do. Thanks for watching.